The wind sliced through the narrow streets of Edinburgh, carrying flurries of snow that clung to Aimee Fraser's dark coat. She stood on her mother's doorstep, her 6-month-old daughter Isla pressed tightly against her chest. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold but from the weight of returning home in defeat. Divorced, nearly penniless, and with nowhere else to go, this was her last resort. She adjusted Isla's blanket, took a shaky breath, and pressed the doorbell with a gloved finger. The door swung open, revealing Katrine Voss, Aimee's mother. Tall and imposing, Katrine's silver-streaked hair was pulled into a tight bun, accentuating her sharp cheekbones and piercing blue eyes. She wore a tailored gray blazer, every inch the headmistress of St. Aldan's Academy. Her gaze swept over Aimee and Isla, narrowing with disapproval. "So you finally dragged yourself back," she said, her voice as cold as the wind outside. "Put your bags by the stairs. Freya's in the kitchen preparing dinner." Aimee stepped into the dimly lit foyer, the warmth of the house doing little to ease the chill in her bones. She'd hoped for a flicker of kindness, a hug, a smile, but Katrine offered nothing. It was the same frigid reception she remembered from childhood, when mistakes were met with lectures instead of comfort. She set her worn duffel bags down, her arms aching from cradling Isla. "Mother, she started, but Katrine silenced her with a sharp wave of her hand. "Freya!" Katrine called toward the back of the house. Moments later, Aimee's older sister appeared, wiping her hands on a sleek designer apron. Freya Voss was the picture of perfection: flawless makeup, a silk blouse tucked into tailored trousers, and a smug smile that widened as she took in Aimee's bedraggled state. Her hazel eyes flicked to Isla, bundled in a faded blanket, and her nose wrinkled slightly. "Oh, the baby's here too," Freya said, her tone dripping with disdain. "You know, some people make thousands just reading Reddit stories on YouTube, no face, no voice, just a laptop. I'd do it myself if I didn't have better prospects to chase." "Hello, Freya," Aimee said, exhaustion weighing down her words. She shifted Isla's weight in her arms. "This is Isla." Freya let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Children? Not for me. Too much mess, too much noise." Katrine nodded in agreement, her lips pressing into a thin line. "A wise choice. Babies ruin everything, especially when you're unprepared and unstable." The words were a pointed jab, and Aimee felt her cheeks flush with shame. Once a promising graphic designer with a bright future, she was now a single mother, betrayed by her ex-husband Lucas, barely scraping by with minimal child support. "Your room's upstairs," Katrine said, turning away dismissively. "The attic. It's dusty and hasn't been used in years, but it'll do. Keep it tidy." Aimee nodded mutely and began the climb up the narrow, creaking staircase, Isla fussing softly against her shoulder. Behind her, she caught the low murmur of Katrine and Freya's voices. "Divorced already," Katrine hissed. "I always knew that Lucas was trouble. How humiliating for me that my daughter's a failure." The attic was a stark, drafty space with peeling wallpaper and a single sagging bed. A cracked mirror hung on one wall, reflecting Aimee's tired face, tangled brown hair, dark circles under her green eyes, a patched sweater that had seen better days. A faded family photo was pinned up beside it. Katrine, Freya, and a younger Aimee, smiling in a rare moment of unity from years ago. Aimee stared at it, then at herself. She barely recognized the woman she'd become. Isla whimpered, and Aimee rocked her gently, whispering, "We'll be okay, little one. I promise." But as she unpacked her meager belongings, a few clothes, Isla's diapers, a battered laptop, she wondered if that promise was empty. Dinner that evening was a tense, silent affair. Katrine presided over the dining table with military precision, napkins folded into perfect triangles, forks aligned, the clink of cutlery the only sound. Aimee sat awkwardly, Isla cradled in her lap, trying not to draw attention. "Must you hold her while you eat?" Katrine snapped, her eyes narrowing. She's asleep, Aimee murmured, keeping her voice low. Freya smirked, scrolling idly on her smartphone. I just closed a deal with the McTavish estate today, top-tier commission. What about you, Aimee? Any plans beyond mooching off us? I'm looking for remote design work, Aimee replied, but Katrine sighed heavily as if the effort pained her. You'll pay rent, of course. £800 a month, utilities included. That's the family discount. Amy's stomach dropped. Rent? Mother, I don't have. Katrine raised her wine glass, cutting her off. This isn't a charity, Aimee. You're an adult now. Act like it. Freya giggled, her eyes glinting with amusement. You're lucky, sis. My properties go for double that. Aimee swallowed her protests, nodding silently. £800 was a fortune with her current finances, but she had no other options for now. She excused herself after dinner, retreating to the attic with Isla. As she lay on the creaky bed, staring at the slanted ceiling, she felt the walls of her childhood home closing in. This wasn't a refuge, it was a cage. But she'd find a way out. She had to, for Isla. Weeks dragged by in Katrine's house, each day a tightrope walk of tension and exhaustion. Aimee spent her mornings hunched over her laptop in the attic, scouring job boards while Isla napped on a blanket beside her. Snow piled against the small, foggy window, casting a gray light over the cramped space. Katrine's rules were suffocating. No noise, no mess, no excuses, and every creak of the floorboards felt like a reprimand. Amy's nerves were frayed, but she kept pushing, desperate for a lifeline. One morning, as Isla cooed softly in her sleep, Amy's phone buzzed on the desk. She answered cautiously. This is Elodie Moreau from Highland Creative, a warm, slightly accented voice said. We reviewed your portfolio and application. We'd like to offer you a position, 3 days in the office, 2 remote. Can you start Monday? Amy's heart leapt, a rush of relief flooding through her. Highland Creative was a small but respected design firm in Edinburgh, and this was her chance. Yes, thank you so much, she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. I'd love to start Monday. She hung up, a rare smile breaking across her face. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. But as she scribbled the start date on a scrap of paper, reality crashed in. What would she do with Isla? Daycare costs in the city were astronomical, and her savings were nearly gone. She'd need help, at least until she could build a cushion. Swallowing her pride, she decided to ask Katrine. She found her mother in the parlor, engrossed in a leather-bound book, a cup of tea steaming beside her. Mother, I got a job, Aimee said, forcing a smile as she stood in the doorway with Isla in her arms. Katrine glanced up, her expression unimpressed. Well, congratulations, she said flatly, returning to her page. Aimee pressed on, her nerves jangling. It's with Highland Creative. I'll be in the office 3 days a week. I was wondering, could you watch Isla during those hours? Just until I can afford daycare? Katrine's book snapped shut with a thud, her eyes narrowing to slits. Absolutely not, she said, her voice cutting like ice. I run a school, Aimee. I'm the headmistress of St. Alden's, not some babysitter. I don't have time to clean up after your messes. Amy's stomach twisted. But she's your granddaughter, she pleaded, clutching Isla tighter. Katrine's gaze hardened. You made your choices when you married that fool and had that child. Deal with the consequences. Before Aimee could respond, Freya sauntered in from the hall, her heels clicking on the hardwood. What's this? Babysitting talk, she said, smirking. Hard pass. Isla would ruin my silk cushions, and I'm terrible with kids anyway. Aimee bit back a surge of anger and sadness, forcing herself to stay calm. Fine, she said quietly. I'll figure it out myself. She turned and climbed back to the attic, her mind racing. That night, after soothing Isla to sleep, Aimee opened her laptop and searched for affordable childcare options. Hours passed, her eyes burning from the screen's glare, until she stumbled across a small daycare run by a local Kirk near her new office. The website promised reasonable rates and a nurturing environment. She dialed the number, and a gentle voice answered. "This is Moira Calder," the woman said. "How can I help you, lass?" Aimee explained her situation, and Moira's tone warmed. "We'd love to have little Isla. Bring her by tomorrow, I'll show you around." The next morning, Aimee bundled Isla up and took a bus to the Kirk. Moira greeted her at the door, a plump woman in her 50s with kind brown eyes and a gray braid. "Welcome, love," she said, shaking Aimee's hand. "And this must be Isla. What a wee beauty." She explained the daycare's routine, her voice soothing, and the fees were just within Aimee's budget. "It'll be a joy to look after her," Moira added with a smile. "Start her tomorrow if you like." Aimee nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you, Moira. This means everything." Her first day at Highland Creative was a breath of fresh air after months of suffocation. The office was a bright, open space filled with the hum of creativity, designers sketching, screens glowing with vibrant layouts. Her supervisor, Sabine, a French expat with a sharp bob and a sharper wit, greeted her warmly. "Aimee, yes? Your portfolio impressed us," Sabine said, leading her to a desk. Over coffee later, Sabine confided, "I raised my son alone after my divorce. Tough, but you'll manage. You've got grit." The work, crafting logos and marketing materials, felt like coming home. Aimee lost herself in the familiar rhythm of design, her confidence flickering back to life. But when she returned to Katrine's house at 6:05 p.m., 5 minutes past the sacred dinner hour, reality snapped her back. Katrine stood in the hall, arms crossed, her face a mask of displeasure. "Dinner's at 5:30 sharp. I expect you to keep your promises." Aimee apologized, her voice small, but Freya chimed in from the dining room. "This isn't a hostel, you know. Show some respect." Isla stirred in Aimee's arms, letting out a soft cry. Katrine's expression darkened. "That noise, keep it down or I'll get a migraine. I won't have my evenings ruined." Aimee hushed Isla quickly, her nerves fraying under the weight of their scorn. She retreated to the attic, her brief moment of triumph overshadowed by the same old tension. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the slanted ceiling, she vowed to escape, for Isla, for herself. This job was her first step, but it wouldn't be her last. The air in Katrine's house thickened with every passing day, a suffocating blend of unspoken resentment and sharp-edged rules. Aimee moved through the rooms like a ghost, tiptoeing to avoid Katrine's wrath or Freya's cutting remarks. Her job at Highland Creative was a lifeline, but home was a battlefield. One afternoon, while Katrine was at St. Alden's, Aimee was ordered to tidy her mother's study, a pristine room of oak furniture and neatly stacked files. As she dusted the desk, a folder slipped to the floor, spilling its contents. Aimee knelt to gather the papers, her eyes catching on receipts: a £300 spa day, a £500 coat for Freya, dinners at Edinburgh's finest restaurants totaling hundreds more. Her hands trembled as she pieced it together. Katrine was funding Freya's lavish lifestyle while charging Aimee exorbitant rent for a dusty attic. The hypocrisy burned in her chest, a quiet fury she tucked away as she finished cleaning. She wouldn't confront them, not yet. She needed a plan first. That evening, she arrived home late after a client meeting ran long. The bus had been delayed by snow, and she stepped through the door at 6:15 p.m., Isla asleep in her arms. Katrine and Freya sat in the parlor, sipping wine by the fireplace. Their conversation halted as Aimee entered, the silence heavy with judgment. "Late again," Katrine said, her tone sharp as a blade. Freya smirked, swirling her glass. "You're dragging this house down, Aimee. Honestly, we'd rather you weren't here." Katrine nodded, her eyes cold. My peace has been shattered since you and that child arrived. I can barely think straight anymore. Aimee's chest tightened, but she bit her tongue and shuffled toward the stairs. The next night, an unusual warmth greeted her, the rich scent of roast lamb wafting from the kitchen. Katrine appeared at the attic door, her demeanor oddly bright. Dinner's at 6 sharp, she said. We're having a guest, Ingrid Bjornsson, my deputy headmistress. I've told her you're Freya's friend staying temporarily. Don't embarrass me in front of her. Aimee frowned, puzzled by the pretense, but nodded. Okay, mother. She dressed simply in a sweater and jeans, then tended to Isla, who developed a slight fever that afternoon. She gave her a dose of medicine and rubbed her back soothingly. Downstairs, Freya glittered in a sequin dress, her makeup flawless as she preened for the guest. The doorbell rang, and Katrine hurried to answer it. Ingrid Bjornsson stepped inside, a stern woman with a clipped Scandinavian accent and a no-nonsense air. Katrine, what a feast, she said, inhaling the aroma. Katrine beamed. Just a modest dinner. This is my daughter Freya and her friend Aimee, who's staying with us for a bit. Dinner began smoothly, the table laden with roast lamb, glazed carrots, and fine china rarely used. Freya regaled Ingrid with tales of her latest property deal, a mansion sold to a wealthy client, while Katrine basked in the reflected glory. Being your daughter, success is in her blood, Ingrid said admiringly. Aimee stayed silent, cradling Isla, who slept peacefully against her chest. She felt invisible, a shadow at her own family's table. Then Isla stirred, her small cries breaking the polished atmosphere. I'll calm her, Aimee whispered, rocking her gently, but the wails grew louder. Katrine's smile vanished, her face hardening into a mask of fury. She slammed her fist on the table, the dishes jumping with a clatter. Silence that child, she barked, her voice echoing. This house isn't a haven for parasites. The words sliced through Aimee like a knife, sharp and final. Ingrid shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Freya smirked, unfazed. Oh, and it's rent day, Freya added, tilting her glass. Pay up or pack up. Hot tears stung Aimee's eyes, spilling down her cheeks as she clutched Isla tighter. This was the breaking point. She couldn't take another moment of their cruelty. We're leaving, she said, her voice small but steady as she rose from the table. Right now. Katrine blinked, caught off guard. In front of Ingrid? Don't be so dramatic. But Aimee was already moving, her resolve hardening with each step. I'm not joking, she said. I've had enough. She stormed upstairs to the attic, her hands shaking with a mix of rage and relief. She grabbed her phone and dialed Moira Calder, the daycare coordinator who'd become a quiet source of comfort. Moira, it's Aimee, she said, her voice trembling. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need a place to stay tonight. Please. Moira's response was immediate, her tone soft and steady. Oh, love, what's happened? Come to my house right away. The door's open for you. Aimee packed frantically, diapers, Isla's clothes, her laptop, a few essentials, cramming them into her duffel bag. It wasn't everything, but it was enough for now. She slung the bag over her shoulder and headed downstairs, Isla cradled in her arms. Katrine and Freya stood by the front door, blocking her path. Where do you think you're going? Katrine demanded, her voice low but laced with anger. You told me to leave, Aimee shot back, feigning calm despite the tears streaking her face. Katrine scoffed. It was a jest, Aimee. Ingrid's gone now, you don't have to overreact. But you still owe the rent, Freya interjected, crossing her arms with a smirk. Aimee took a deep breath, the words she'd held back for weeks spilling out. I've had enough. You're not my family, not anymore. Isla and I deserve better than this. Katrine's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise breaking her composure. What are you saying? You have nowhere else to go. Aimee met her gaze, unflinching. Yes, I do. A place with kind people who don't call us parasites. Katrine's face twisted with fury. Do as you please then, she shouted. But don't come crawling back when you regret it. This door will never open for you again. Aimee turned away, stepping into the snowy night. Rain mixed with her tears as the cold bit at her cheeks. She wrapped Isla tighter in her coat and flagged a taxi. To Moira Calder's house, please, she told the driver, her voice steady despite the storm within. As the car pulled away, she didn't look back, not once. Taxi rolled through Edinburgh's snow-dusted streets, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold against the dark. Aimee held Isla close, her daughter's soft breaths a small comfort against the chaos of the night. Her tears had dried, leaving a raw ache in her chest, but beneath it was a strange, fragile sense of freedom. She'd walked away from Katrine and Freya, from the house that had never truly been a home. Now she was heading toward an unknown, trusting in Moira's kindness. Moira Calder's cottage came into view, a single-story house with a pitched roof and warm lights glowing through the curtains. The front door opened as the taxi pulled up and Moira stepped out, her gray braids swaying as she waved Aimee inside. Come in, love, out of that cold, she said, her voice a soothing balm. Torin, Moira's husband, followed, a burly man with a graying beard and a gentle smile. He took Aimee's duffel bag without a word, his presence steady and reassuring. Thank you for having us, Aimee said, her voice cracking as she stepped into the cozy living room. The space was modest but alive with warmth, soft rugs underfoot, a crackling fire in the hearth, walls adorned with family photos and handmade decorations. Smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke, a stark contrast to the sterile chill of Katrine's house. There's nothing to apologize for, Torin said quietly, setting her bag by the stairs. Helping friends is what we do. Moira knelt beside Aimee, peering at Isla with concern. She's got a wee fever, hasn't she? She said, brushing a gentle hand over the baby's forehead. Did you give her medicine? Aimee nodded. Yes, earlier. She seems a bit better now. Moira smiled. Good. We've got the guest room ready for you both. Stay as long as you need. She placed a reassuring hand on Aimee's shoulder. How about some warm soup first? Then you can tell me what's happened. They settled at the kitchen table, a sturdy wooden slab covered with a checkered cloth. Moira ladled out steaming bowls of leek and potato soup, the aroma wrapping Aimee in comfort. As they ate, the story poured out, Katrine's cold welcome, the steep rent, Freya's taunts, and the final blow, being called a parasite in front of a stranger. They just sat there sipping wine while I cried, Aimee said, tears welling up again. My own mother and sister treating us like we're nothing. Moira squeezed her hand tightly, her brown eyes glistening. You're no parasite, Aimee. You're a strong mother, fighting for your bairn. Isla's lucky to have you. Torin nodded, his deep voice gentle. Take it one step at a time, lass. Tonight, rest easy. We'll figure out tomorrow together. Aimee managed a small smile, the weight on her shoulders lifting slightly. In this humble kitchen, surrounded by kindness, she felt seen for the first time in months. That night in the guest room, a small space with a quilted bed and a window overlooking a snowy garden, Aimee lay beside Isla, listening to her daughter's steady breathing. The darkness outside was vast, but within these walls, a light of hope flickered. She wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Moira took her to the Kirk daycare, introducing her to Lena Petrov, a fellow worker there. Lena was a wiry woman in her 30s with a Russian accent and a quick smile, holding the hand of her 4-year-old son, Sasha. I left my ex 5 years ago, Lena said as they watched their children play. It's a hard road, but you'll climb it. Oh, there's a flat open next to mine at Rowan Court. Cheap and the landlords love kids. Amy's interest peaked, and that afternoon she met Nils and Astrid Hagen, a Norwegian couple who managed the small apartment complex. Nils, a lanky man with a blonde beard, grinned as Astrid, petite and rosy-cheeked, showed her a modest unit: kitchen, living room, bedroom, and a window facing a park. "We prioritize families," Astrid said warmly. "We raised 4 of our own, so we know the struggle. 1 month's deposit, pay the rest when you can." Amy's throat tightened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Nils patted her shoulder. "We help each other, Ja? That's how it works." At work, Sabine was thrilled when Aimee shared the news. "Rowan Court? That's near my place," she exclaimed. "I'll introduce you to a mom's group, good people to lean on." Over the weekend, Aimee moved into the flat. It was a whirlwind of kindness. Moira donated a crib, Torin built a simple bookshelf, Lena brought a box of toys, and Sabine dropped off a stack of baby clothes. Standing in the small living room, sunlight streaming through the window, Aimee held Isla close and whispered, "This is our new start, little one." The space was hers, simple, imperfect, but filled with possibility. For the first time, she believed she could build something better, not just for Isla, but for herself too. 6 months flew by in a haze of hard work and quiet victories. Amy's life, once a tangle of despair, began to take shape in her little flat at Rowan Court. Isla thrived at the Kirk daycare, her giggles echoing through the room as Moira doted on her like a second grandmother. "She's a bright wee thing," Moira often said, braiding Isla's fine hair with care. Amy's job at Highland Creative blossomed too. Her designs for a local brewery's rebrand earned her a small promotion, increasing her remote days to 3 a week. It meant more mornings with Isla, watching her daughter explore the world from their sunlit living room. Nils and Astrid Hagen, the landlords, became unexpected allies. On days when Aimee worked late, Astrid would pop by with a warm smile. "I'll take Isla for an hour," she'd say, scooping the baby up with practiced ease. "She's like our 5th grandchild." Nils, meanwhile, fixed a leaky faucet in the kitchen one afternoon, waving off Amy's thanks. "No bother," he said, his Norwegian accent thick. "We look out for our own." Their kindness was a steady anchor, grounding Aimee in her new life. Lena Petrov, her neighbor, turned into her closest friend. They'd met at the daycare, but their bond grew over shared cups of tea and weekend park trips with Isla and Sasha. Lena's sharp humor and resilience, she'd rebuilt her life after a messy divorce, gave Aimee strength. "You're tougher than you know," Lena told her once, as their kids chased pigeons across the grass. "Look at all you've done already." The moms group Sabine introduced her to was another lifeline, a mix of women from all walks of life, swapping stories and babysitting duties at the community center. Aimee found herself laughing again, her voice mingling with theirs in a chorus of support. Katrine and Freya didn't vanish entirely. Their calls started a few weeks after Aimee left, casual at first, as if nothing had happened. "Are you coming back soon?" Katrine asked one evening, her tone clipped. Amy's answer was calm but firm. "No, Mother. We're fine here." As weeks turned to months, their tone shifted. "Freya feels bad," Katrine said once. "If you need money, I could lend you some." Freya even left a voicemail. "I might have been harsh. Let's talk." But Aimee wasn't swayed. She'd heard their apologies before, hollow promises that crumbled under pressure. She deleted the messages and moved on. For Isla's 8-month birthday, Moira insisted on hosting a party at her cottage. The living room buzzed with familiar faces, Sabine with a homemade cake, Lena and Sasha with a noisy toy drum, Nils and Astrid with a knitted blanket, and a handful of friends from work and the moms group. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and the fire crackled as laughter filled the air. "I can't believe it," Lena marveled, nudging Aimee. 6 months ago, you were a wreck. Now look at you, full of confidence." Aimee smiled, cradling Isla. "It's because of all of you." I couldn't have done it alone. Moira raised a glass of elderflower cordial, her eyes twinkling. A toast to Aimee and Isla for their health and happiness. The room echoed with cheers, and Isla clapped her tiny hands, caught up in the excitement. Aimee's heart swelled, the warmth of the moment wrapping around her like a blanket. This was what family should feel like. Not the cold judgment of Katrine's house, but this circle of care and support. Later, as they ate cake and swapped stories, Sabine pulled Aimee aside. "You've built something real here," she said. "Don't ever doubt that." That night, driving home with Nils and Astrid, Aimee felt a quiet peace settle over her. Rose handed her a small box as they reached the flat. "For Isla," she said with a smile. Inside was a silver star-shaped locket. "Put a picture of someone special in it," Astrid explained. "I gave the same to my girls." Aimee hugged her, tears prickling her eyes. "Thank you, really." Nils chuckled softly. "Family's what you make it, lass. Blood's just a start." Back in her flat, Aimee tucked Isla into her crib and sat by the window, the locket glinting in her hand. She'd fill it with Isla's photo, a symbol of the life they were building step by steady step. The seasons shifted and Aimee's life found a rhythm: work, daycare, park days with Lena, quiet evenings with Isla. One crisp autumn night, as she sat by her flat's small window, gazing at a sky dotted with stars, her phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello, is this Aimee Fraser?" a clipped voice asked. "This is Edinburgh General Hospital. Katrine Voss has been admitted after a stroke. You're listed as her emergency contact." Aimee's breath caught, her hand tightening around the phone. A storm of emotions surged through her: anger, guilt, a flicker of worry. "Is she okay?" she managed to ask. "She's stable now," the nurse replied, "but her condition was serious. Can you come soon?" Aimee nodded, though the nurse couldn't see. "Yes, I'll be there." "Thank you." She hung up, staring blankly at the wall. Katrine, the woman who'd called her a parasite, now lay vulnerable, reaching out through a hospital form. She paced the flat, Isla sleeping soundly in her crib. The past 6 months had been a deliberate uncoupling from her mother's cruelty. She'd built walls to protect herself and her daughter. Yet here was a crack in that armor, a pull she couldn't ignore. She needed help, though, and dialed Moira. "Carol, it's Aimee," she said when the familiar voice answered. "My mother's in the hospital, a stroke. Could you watch Isla tonight? I need to go see her." Moira's response was immediate. "Of course, love. Bring her over, I'll keep her safe." Aimee packed a small bag for Isla and drove to Moira's cottage, the night air sharp with the scent of fallen leaves. Moira met her at the door, concern etched on her face. "What happened, lass?" she asked, taking Isla's carrier. Aimee explained briefly: Katrine's stroke, the hospital call, her tangled feelings. "I don't know what I'll say to her," she admitted. Moira hugged her gently. "You don't have to decide now. Go see her, feel it out. We'll be here when you get back." The hospital loomed ahead, its sterile lights cutting through the darkness. Aimee walked the long corridor to the intensive care unit, her footsteps echoing. At the ward's entrance, she spotted Freya leaning against the wall. Her sister's usual polish was gone, her hair was mussed, her eyes red-rimmed. She straightened as Aimee approached, avoiding her gaze. "She's awake," Freya said quietly. "Stable but weak. They say she'll recover with time." Aimee nodded, bracing herself. "Thanks for letting me know," she said, her tone neutral. Freya shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think you'd come," she muttered. "After everything." Aimee met her eyes, unflinching. "She's still my mother, Freya. That doesn't erase what you both did, but I'm here." Freya looked away, and Aimee stepped past her into the room. Katrine lay in the hospital bed, her sharp features softened by fatigue, and 4 dripping into her arm. She turned her head as Aimee entered, her blue eyes widening slightly. "Aimee," she rasped, her voice thin. "I didn't expect you'd come." Aimee stood by the bed, hands clasped tightly. "I almost didn't," she said honestly. "But you're still family, whether I like it or not." Katrine's gaze flickered, a trace of something, regret perhaps, crossing her face. "I was harsh," she said slowly. "Too harsh, maybe." It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was more than Aimee had ever heard from her. She sat down, unsure what to say next, the weight of their history pressing down on her like a stone. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beep of the monitor tracking Katrine's pulse. Aimee sat beside the bed, watching her mother's chest rise and fall beneath the thin blanket. Katrine looked smaller here, stripped of her commanding presence, her bun loosened, her blazer replaced by a hospital gown. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Katrine spoke again, her voice frail but deliberate. "I didn't mean for it to end like this," she said, staring at the ceiling. "You leaving all that mess." Aimee's jaw tightened. "You called me a parasite, Mother. In front of your colleague. You and Freya made it clear I wasn't welcome." Katrine winced, her fingers twitching on the sheet. "I was angry," she admitted. "You coming back, needing help, it felt like a failure. My failure reflected in you." Aimee frowned, caught off guard. "So you punished me for it?" Katrine didn't answer directly, her eyes drifting shut. "I've always been hard. It's how I survived. How I raised you both." Freya slipped into the room, hovering by the door. "She's right," she said, her voice low. "I was awful too. I'm sorry, Aimee." Her words sounded rehearsed, but her expression held a flicker of sincerity. Aimee studied her sister, then her mother, weighing their words against months of pain. "I appreciate that," she said carefully. "But it doesn't undo what happened. I've built a life without you. Isla and I are happy now." Katrine's eyes opened, sharp again for a moment. "You don't need us, then?" Aimee shook her head. "Not like before. But I'll help while you're here because it's the right thing." She stayed for an hour, listening as Katrine recounted the stroke, sudden dizziness at school, a collapse in her office. Freya filled in gaps, her usual bravado muted. When Aimee left, promising to return the next day, she felt a strange calm. She drove back to Moira's, the night sky clearing above her. Moira greeted her with a cup of tea, Isla asleep upstairs. "How was it?" she asked. Aimee sighed. "Complicated. They're sorry, sort of. But I'm not going back, not to that house, that life." Moira nodded. "You've chosen your own path, love. That's strength." Back at Rowan Court, Aimee settled into routine, visiting Katrine occasionally as she recovered. The apologies didn't erase the past, but they softened the edges. One evening, over tea with Moira and Torin, she unpacked it all. "They want me to forgive them," she said. "But I don't owe them that." Torin leaned forward, his voice steady. "Family's not just blood, lass. It's who lifts you up, not who drags you down." Moira agreed. "You've got us, Lena, Sabine, people who've shown you what real care looks like." Aimee nodded, clarity settling in. She'd helped Katrine heal, but her true family was here, in the bond she'd forged. During a later hospital visit, she set boundaries. "I'll support you through this," she told Katrine, "but I'm not moving back. My home's elsewhere now." Katrine accepted it, her fight dimmed by illness. Freya, too, backed off, their dynamic shifting to a cautious distance. Aimee left the hospital lighter, her choice firm. She'd chosen love over obligation. A year after leaving Katrine's, Aimee stood taller. Her career soared. Highland Creative gave her a lead designer role. Isla grew into a lively toddler, adored at daycare. Her chosen family expanded. Nils and Astrid hosted dinners, Lena shared late-night chats, the moms group became a second home. Katrine recovered fully but kept her distance, their contact limited to occasional calls. Aimee found peace in her independence, her heart full of the life she'd built from ashes. On Isla's first birthday, Aimee threw a party in her flat, streamers, cake, and a room full of laughter. Moira, Torin, Sabine, Lena, Nils, Astrid, and friends gathered, celebrating Aimee's journey. Astrid gifted a locket for Isla, a silver star to hold her photo. "To new beginnings," Aimee toasted, her voice strong. That night, she sat by the window, the locket in hand, stars above. She'd turned pain into power, and the future shone bright, hers to shape with Isla by her side.